Hello you guys, and welcome to Books by Britt TV. I'm Britt, and today we are going to be discussing some of my more favorite and memorable reads from middle school, 6th through 8th grade. And I want to say, when I got to middle school, it was kind of a trickier time. That was around the time that I started, thinking about boys, developing crushes and things like that. So, my middle school years, I still read all genres, but that's when I mostly read like, historical romances, and that was around the time I was introduced to urban fiction, or modern African American literature. Was in my middle school years. And one thing I'll say, just about every historical romance novel that I read during that time period, they were all based in England, of course, and just about every last one of them was set during King Edward II reign. Like every last one of them, they always featured he and his wife Eleanor, and it was some kind of reference to the Holy Land or the Holy Wars. The Saracen Desert was in like almost every romance novel I read during that time period, right? And so it was fun. They were all fun reads, of course. And then as far as urban literature, I don't really want to call it urban fiction because I feel like when you call it urban fiction, people kind of demean it and don't put it don't recognize the people's like hard work and talent that went into making, to writing a story. But that was around the time when I was in middle school, at least from what I can remember, that was around the time that artists like Eric Jerome Dickey, Carl Weber, Dama S. Poole, LaJill Hunt, I can't remember the other guy's name, R.M. Johnson. That was around the time that they were like getting a lot of recognition. Was between 2002 and 2006 was that emergence of that particular genre, which I just felt like it was African American literature, the same as I feel about Beloved and The Eyes Watching God, but they tried to kind of like box it into urban fiction. Now, I had access to a lot of those books because at the time there was this subscription called Black Expressions, and you can order books from there all the time. And I remember my mom used to order a lot of books like that, a lot of books from Black Expressions, and that was Black Expressions. All right, so anyway, let's get into my list. All right. So the first book is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Y'all already know I am a huge Harry Potter fan. I started reading that series in like 3rd or 4th grade and have been hooked ever since. But Order of the Phoenix came out, I believe, in July of 2003. Yeah, like July of 2003. And my cousin actually bought the book first, but I read it before him. And I think that's one of my favorite Harry Potter books because I kind of felt like he was going through what I was going through, even though he would technically have been like in a high schooler. But that's when you could see that Harry Potter was starting to feel like he was starting to notice all the changes, like mentally and physically, that were happening to him. Versus how sometimes you will see that something's changing, but you don't really pay no attention until you're old enough to be like, hey, things are changing. But yes, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix by J.K. Rowling, good book. This second book, G-Spot by Noire. I never learned how to pronounce her name. Is Noire. And G-Spot, I remember on the cover of the book, it was like the coldest winter ever meets erotic fiction. However, I wouldn't compare that book to the coldest winter ever. It's about this young girl named Juicy who has an older man for a boyfriend. He's like 27 years older than her. And she's a young hottie. And she wants to have sex, but he doesn't give it to her. And then his handsome son comes home, who's only a few years older than Juicy. And things start heating up for her. It's a really good book. Really good book. That was a fun book. The Preacher's Son by Carl Weber. I feel like that was probably the first book I read that introduced me to the modern African American literature of the 2000s. Let me say that, because I know it was another renaissance in like the late 80s and the 90s with Zora Neale Hurston. Not Zora Neale Hurston, I'm sorry, but Terry McMillan and what's her name? Diane Whetstone McKinney. I know that it was a renaissance then, but I mean like in urban fiction, when they started calling it urban fiction versus African American literature. But yeah, Preacher Son by Carl Weathers was about this young man whose father was a bishop, and his mother wanted him to take over reins, but he doesn't want to do it, you know, but he's reluctant to tell his mother that he wants to go to law school. Then he falls in love with this girl from the wrong side of the tracks, right? And then another story another story within it is his sister Donna, who has a secret lover and ends up being pregnant, and her secret lover turned out to be the preacher that her father was grooming to take over his spot, because his father, I believe his father knew that his son didn't really want to be preacher. They didn't want to be a preacher, whatnot. But that was a really good, explosive book. I remember I really enjoyed that book, and I got that book from my mom, but I know I purchased it like 2 or 3 years ago on Kindle, because it was a good book, and I like to have, you travel, you want to just sit down and read a book. This fourth book, Yo-Yo Love, by, I believe, Dama S. Poole. Now, here's the thing about all the urban fiction of the 2000s. Just about every last book was set in New York or Philadelphia. It's like, in this period, and every last book was set in New York or Philadelphia that I remember reading. Like, it was always set in New York or Philadelphia. And I had a girlfriend, who I'm not going to mention her name. She and I used to rewrite the stories to fit, Atlanta, Tallahassee, because I went to school in Tallahassee, and Jacksonville, to fit our language, because it's like the way those girls talk, we understood it, but we wanted something that fit where we was from. So I remember we used to write a lot of fan fiction to it. But anyway, Yo-Yo Love by Dama S. Poole was about this young girl who went to Temple University, I believe, just navigating her love life, going to school and navigating the love life. And I remember she fell in love with the guy who turned out to be married, and she ended up like babysitting his child or something like that. And at the end of the book, I believe she ended up alone, but it was a really good book. Really good book. Baby Mama Drama, which was another book by Carl Weathers. I remember reading a lot of his stuff in middle school. I believe I read quite a few in high school as well. I'm gonna make a list of that. But I remember reading a lot of his stuff in middle school. But Baby Mama Drama was about these two sisters, Stephanie and Jasmine, who was as different as night as day. And Stephanie was the baby mama who had the drama, a regular baby daddy. But she met a nice guy in the army, and they had a nice little love story. Then Jasmine was the goody two-shoes sister who ended up falling in love with a drug dealer who had a baby mama from hell. Really good story. Drama Queen by LaJill Hunt. I remember reading this book in 7th grade. Yeah, it was in 7th grade, because I remember all the girls in the band, we passed this book around, and when I finally got the book back 3 weeks later, my mom was so mad because the book was like, had a whole bunch of words, so when you open the book in the middle, pages fall. It was like, I remember my mom was so mad about that book, because like, I like to have, I have a little library, which I have a tour of that one day, but I have a lot of books, and I like to hold on to my books. I don't mind loaning them out, but I like to hold on to the books that I buy. That's the reason I buy them. But Drama Queen was about this young girl named Kayla, who, a few days before her wedding, she found her fiance and her sister in bed together. So she called off the wedding. And then she ended up meeting and having sex with this guy who looked very similar to her fiance. And she got pregnant by him, but her ex-fiance, still wanted her back. And that's the story. It was a really good book. You should definitely check that one out. I also bought that book on my Kindle as well. I repurchased that book on my Kindle because it was a good story. The next one is American Star by Jackie Collins. When I tell you I love that book, it was so good. It was about living in a small town. It was based in a small town in Kansas, I believe. And who are the characters in the book? Nick, Primo, Sandra, I forget everybody's names. But anyway, 3 characters from the book when they grew up in a small town and they lived in a trailer park. Nick and Sandra were brother and sister, and they lived in a trailer park. Nick was white, his dad was white, and Sandra mother Aretha, she was black. And Sandra, you know, she was ostracized because I believe the book was based in like the 50s, the 60s, and the 60s and the 70s. And Sandra was ostracized because she was mixed, even though they all went to the same school. But anyway, they escape out of this small town right before a large hurricane hit, and they make it big. Sandra becomes a superstar in singing, and Nick becomes a superstar actor. It's a really good book. You should definitely check that book out. Player Haters by Carl Weber. I'm telling you, I read so much of Carl Weber books. It's not even a shame because it's a book. I believe it was based in New York too. I'm telling you, every last book, like urban fiction I read, was based in New York and Philadelphia. But it was about 3 siblings, I believe. It's about 3 siblings. One was married and with a wife and kid, and he was about to cheat on his wife, I believe. Another one, his old lady or his girlfriend was supposed to have been pregnant, but he was like, the kid wasn't his, and he kept denying the kid, and his sister kept telling him, oh, the kid is his. But his sister was dating a player too, and the middle brother, he was a player, the one who was denying the child as being his. He was a player too. I remember that part of the book, but I haven't read it in a long time. I might have to go back and read that one. And then number 10, A Day Later and a Dollar Short. Now, I read this book in middle school, but when we first moved to Tallahassee in 1999, I remember my mom used to read this book all the time. Like, her sisters read this book, and like all her girlfriends would come over. They all talked about this book, A Day Late and a Dollar Short by Terry McMillan. And when I finally read this book, I was so floored. It was such a good book. It was so good. I think I read it in the 8th grade, but it was about this because. That's why I was all excited reading the book, because I was kind of afraid to read the book in elementary school. I was excited to read it because every time my aunties or my mama's girlfriends would come over, or anybody, you know, like, everybody would always talk about how this woman was talking about her children in the book by Ola. And I was like, I want to read it, but you know, I'm a little too young, so I couldn't read it just then, even though I still can read Color Purple. But I couldn't read it just then. So when I finally read the book, I was so excited. So it's told from 6 different viewpoints. Viola, the mother, Cecil, Viola's husband, the father, and their 4 children. Paris is the oldest. She's a perfectionist with a little addiction to pills. Charlotte, the middle child. She's the second oldest. Quintessential middle child. Woe is me. Nobody pays attention to me. Nobody loves me. But she still had a fun story with her 3 kids. Very interesting. The third child was their only son, Louis. He had a heartbreaking story, a very heartbreaking story, but I feel like he found redemption at the end of his story. So I was very happy with the way his story turned out. And the 4th one was Janelle, the baby of the family. She was the baby, is all I can say. She was a little flighty. She was a little ditzy, little broad. Excuse me. She was a ditzy character. Her story was the only one I felt was unresolved at the end of the book. It was still a good book nonetheless. I'm not gonna ever like just trash a book, but I feel like her story was still a little unresolved. Like we were still looking for something regarding her story. But her story was about her daughter, and her husband George, and you know, she caught him molesting her daughter one day. I think she actually caught it during her first point of view. She caught him molesting her daughter, and I would say it was a good book, but I just felt like her story was unresolved. Like Paris was resolved, everybody's story was resolved except for hers. But yeah, so that is my list for middle school reads. I will be back again with the high school reads, with those type of books that I read in high school. Yeah, so I will be back with that particular list. I'm really excited about that because in high school, that's when I started reading like even more of everything. Like that's when I was introduced to Toni Morrison's book, Toni Morrison's work, more of Zora Neale Hurston work. I was actually introduced to her in middle school, but I didn't really have the mental capacity to understand her writing until high school came along. Until I got in high school, particularly in 10th grade. But yeah, middle school was a really, really tricky time. And the only thing that was the best thing about middle school was I had to catch the street bus or city bus to school. I didn't have, because I went to a school outside of the district so that I can go to school with my cousins. And I used to, the bus terminal transfer system, the bus terminal was right across the street from the library, and it used to take an hour for my bus to come back around. Like, I never made it there in time enough to like get on to the next bus immediately. And so I used to go across the street to the library, and I was sitting there for an hour. In middle school, I was sitting there from, I would get there like 3 o'clock, and I would sit at the library until 4 o'clock when it was time for me to catch my next bus. So that was one of the best things about it. But yeah, middle school was really fun. Like, I had a lot of fun reading in middle school. But the school library, it was so difficult to get into that library. Like how most schools would allow you to come into the libraries in the morning. My school didn't do that. Like, those librarians very rarely let us in. The only time we could actually get into the library is when it was time for like science fair projects or history fair projects to complete those type of projects. But other than that, like the whole 3 years I was at Nims Middle School in Tallahassee, Florida on Orange Avenue, I think I only went inside of that library probably 8 times the entire 3 years I was at that school. So I never ever got to check out a book like that. And the only people who went in there was the people who did the morning and the student news in the morning. But nonetheless, I still had a public library. But yeah, that was my read. Let me know some of y'all reads from middle school, because I'm really interested in that type of stuff and learning what you guys read in middle school. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and of course comment on your favorite reads or most memorable reads from middle school, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.